Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Mike Morgan faces an uphill battle in the 2024 North Carolina governor's race. The former state Supreme Court justice is going up against Democratic Attorney General Josh Stein for the party's nomination. Stein has the backing of the party establishment, and his campaign is flush with cash. To stand out, Morgan has released an unusually cinematic and expensive ad that has generated some buzz. But will it be enough for Morgan to overtake Stein? WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain has been asking that question, and he joins us today. Later in the program, we'll hear from WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht, who has been tracking messaging in the Republican primary. Travis, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Travis, when Justice Morgan said he'd be running for governor, it was a bit of a surprise to some people who follow state politics. Why is that?
Because Josh Stein, the Attorney General, as you mentioned, he was the heir apparent and has basically been running for governor for, 2 years, maybe longer. Current Governor Roy Cooper, also Democrat, is term limited. And it was just Stein for so long that we all kind of thought it's just going to be Stein on the Democratic side. The Republicans will have a nomination fight, but Stein will be and then Mike Morgan, who has a lengthy judicial career, 30 years on the bench, won a statewide election in 2016 to the state Supreme Court. He comes out and says, hey, me too.
So without the backing of the establishment, and presumably with less fundraising firepower, he's really got to figure out a way to stand out. Now, you report that he's put out this really compelling ad. Tell us about the ad and why is it different from other political ads?
Yeah, so it's very common when someone announces to put out a bio ad, something that's biographical, maybe 3 minutes long, goes on the internet, and then you cut it down. You raise money with it, and you cut it down and put parts of it on TV. What was different for him was I don't think it's overselling it to call it breathtakingly cinematic. It is just beautifully shot, and it tells a really compelling story. Justice Morgan was the first black kid in his elementary school in New Bern. So, and first of all, he had skipped a grade, so he's already a year younger than everybody. He shows up, and the way the commercial starts is an 8-year-old kid playing him, just with this long hallway to walk down. And then all these white kids are like looking out the door of their classrooms and kind of pointing and laughing. And he calls it, the hardest steps he's ever taken. And then he was the first black drum major in his high school. He graduated high school at 16. He went to Duke University. He got his law degree, became a judge. And it just walks through his life in a way that it tells a really compelling story in an incredibly compelling way. And I think it was the best political ad I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of them. We almost never write about ads, but when I was still thinking about it 48 hours after I had seen it, I thought, all right, there's something here, and I'm gonna write about it.
So you say it's breathtakingly cinematic. What were some of the techniques used to make it so?
So it's got wonderful music in it. It's got a cast of like 40 people. There's like a Chevy from the 60s that I don't even know where they got it. They shot it on location. It's not just someone talking to a camera. But what really made it stood out was the use of what's called the double dolly technique. And if you're familiar with Spike Lee's movies, he's kind of famous for this. It's where both the actor and the camera are on wheels and they move in unison so that it looks like the character is not walking forward, but it's just moving through the scene. It's a really cool technique, and when you see it, you'll understand it. That's used a couple of times in this ad, and you just don't see stuff like that in a political ad.
And how does it compare to what Stein's doing? Stein, I'm sure he has his own marketing.
So Stein has his own bio video. I think it's probably 3 minutes or so. It starts with a compelling life story that Josh Stein has. It starts with the firebombing of Stein's father's law office. He was a civil rights attorney in Charlotte. But then it immediately pivots into criticisms of Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who's the front runner on the Republican side. We mentioned that, for a while there, Stein looked like he was just going to be, ushered in and there wouldn't be a Democratic primary. So he's already running against the Republicans. So it's kind of a much different tactic, and it's not as cinematic. Morgan told me he did a national search for a director. He ended up coming up with a guy who had done a big-time viral ad out of Texas. A lot came together and was put into this ad that you don't usually see.
Now, Stein leads Morgan by more than 25 points in some polls. Is Morgan's ad strong enough to make this race closer?
I don't know that any ad is strong enough to turn it into a victory. Make it closer? Yeah, sure, but I don't know how much closer. I mean, the money's still on Stein, and I mean that kind of literally. I mean, Stein has a war chest of like $8 million. Morgan has not had to report yet how much he's raised, so we don't know. The idea with an ad like this is you want donors to see it. You want people to send you money for it. And then you want to use it, use that money to cut it down into a shorter spot. You put that on TV, and it just kind of takes on a life of its own. I don't know that that's happening. The numbers have gotten better for Morgan on that as far as how many people have seen the ad and shared the ad. But he feels like the Democratic establishment, because Governor Roy Cooper has endorsed Josh Stein, as have a number of leaders in the Democratic Party, elected people in the Democratic Party. And he feels like Morgan does that Democrats are scared to even share this online because they feel like Roy Cooper will push back on them in the future because they have not, supported the governor's, who is the head of the Democratic Party, obviously, his preferred candidate in this race.
Now, Morgan obviously knew the odds were long when he got into this race, but why even bother? What's his pitch to voters as an alternative to Stein?
He would argue, I think, that the odds have been against him his entire life. A black kid growing up in the 60s in Newbern, North Carolina, and he just consistently succeeds, just over and over and over again. I mean, when you're graduating high school at 16, you're obviously very smart, and then he gets his law degree, and people speak quite highly of him, and I think he feels like not say how he feels, but he says he is the most qualified person in this race. And he's also got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. That was something interesting in sitting and talking to him for about an hour about his life story. And I don't know how you wouldn't have a chip on your shoulder when you've gone through some of the things he's gone through and what so many black people have gone through for so many years. But he is kind of translating that into, I am going to move down the field. I am going to move forward. You're not going to stop me, even if that means I'm running for governor uphill.
Well, we'll see how far along he's gotten come March. Travis, thanks.
Absolutely.
That's WRAL state government reporter Travis Fain. For his recent article on Justice Mike Morgan's campaign for governor, visit the NC Capitol section of WRAL.com. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear from WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht about what's happening in the GOP primary. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking about messaging in the race for governor in North Carolina. Bill Graham is the only Republican candidate airing statewide ads. His messages take hardline stances on prosecuting criminals and offer plans for cutting taxes and boosting employment, and they appear to be reaching voters in his long-shot bid for his party's nomination. WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht has been keeping tabs on the campaign and the GOP primary, and he joins us now to explain. Paul, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
In the previous segment, we talked about Justice Mike Morgan's Democratic campaign and his compelling ad. You looked at the GOP race and found similar dynamics, a long-shot candidate seeking an edge through airtime.
Right. Bill Graham is a former prosecutor. He's actually run for office before, but it was years ago, more than 10 years ago, I believe. And so his name's been out of the public eye. And so he to this point had virtually no recognition, and he got in the race late on October 18th is when he started launching his campaign ads. Now, one thing that he has that other long-shot candidates don't, is he's pledged $5 million for his campaign, and he's spending it already on these television ads that seem to have already made a difference in the race.
Well, tell us about the ads.
Well, in one of them, he talks about crime, and it shows different TV footage of, people robbing stores and people going through the streets looking desolate. And another one, he talks about standing up to China. And that's something that, frankly, hasn't been talked about a lot in the Republican primary. It's generally been about liberals and the left and stuff like that. So he's taking a unique angle, you could say, with these ads.
Now, he's taking on Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who has a commanding lead in the race, according to recent polls. Are Graham's ads working?
Well, so far his ads are not about Robinson specifically, but what is surprising is how quickly the public has taken notice. He launched his campaign on October 18th, like I said, with no name recognition. Meredith College here in Raleigh, did a poll between November 1st and November 5th. That's just 2 weeks after he launched. And their poll discovered that he got 5% of the vote. Now, not much. Robinson is up in the 40s, so he's still way, way, way behind. But that's higher than Dale Folwell, the state treasurer, who has been in the race since May, I believe. And so just in 2 weeks, he went from being irrelevant, completely not involved at all, to being number 2.
Now, what has Robinson's strategy been? He's got such a big lead. Does he even need to advertise? And I know that he's got some messaging out there. What is his pitch right now?
Well, it's the same that it was just 3-4 years ago. And let's go back in time a little bit. Mark Robinson did not hold any office before he became lieutenant governor. He sort of went viral in Republican and conservative circles after a fiery speech in support of gun rights at the Greensboro City Council, I believe, and then just sort of gained traction and talking about his own life, being, as he puts it, a victim of NAFTA and struggling to make ends meet, and then pulling himself up by his bootstraps. And then, couple his life story with him being a powerful speaker, and you have someone that's really compelling, at least to the Republican base. And so he has this big lead. He's been considered the front runner and the person to sort of take the GOP nomination for years now. Now, the race didn't start officially until 2023, but once the whole polling started, it showed him way ahead. He has not had to do anything. He's not on the air with ads because he doesn't have to be. He can hold events as lieutenant governor. He is going to other speaking gigs like CPAC. That's a convention for conservative speakers and lawmakers. He's a favorite of Donald Trump. He's endorsed by Donald Trump. And he also goes to lots of churches around the state. So while others are trying to gain traction, getting on TV, Robinson is just enjoying this big lead and going around the state and continuing the same pitch that he had back in 2019 and 2020.
Now, one thing Graham isn't advertising in his ads is his stance on abortion. Why is that?
That's one thing that we talk about in our story online, is that Robinson is a lot of his beliefs are out there. And that's one thing Bill Graham talked about is, Robinson has beliefs. He doesn't have plans. That's the Bill Graham accusation against him. And, Robinson has called abortion murder. Well, and now he's come out and said he supports a heartbeat bill with exceptions. On Bill Graham's website, there is no mention, or there was no mention, as of the time we wrote our story, there's no mention of abortion. I don't believe it even mentioned the words pro-life. And so we reached out to his campaign and asked, hey, what's his position here? And his campaign advisor, Paul Shoemaker, said he's pro-life. He's always been pro-life. He's anti-abortion. And the reason that it's not mentioned on the website is because Graham believes that the legislature has done a good enough a job of addressing it already. And he does not plan on prioritizing it. On his campaign website, there are all these things he plans to do, like repeal the food sales tax and, ban China from owning property. No plans for abortion. And so that's something we get into more detail with in our story.
Now, unlike the Democratic side, where there's lots of establishment support for Stein, Republicans aren't all lined up behind Robinson. Is there a chance that Graham can make this competitive with these ads?
It's possible. It depends on whether or not he can attract more money from big-time donors after his ads run, after his $5 million is run out. And we'll see whether or not that's the case in January. Like I said, after Christmas, people don't spend as much on advertising around the holidays. But even before Mark Robinson entered the race, which everyone knew he would do, Republican consultants, campaign consultants, and onlookers and experts said he's a flawed candidate because of the things he has said about abortion, because of the things he said about women. He has been criticized for some of his comments about Jewish people and the Holocaust. His past social media post seems to question just how bad it was. And so for a while, there have been these sort of backroom discussions of, should there be another alternative? Should the Republican Party's biggest donors sort of coalesce around a different candidate? Because who might be better in the general election. And I think Bill Graham would like it to be him. It certainly hasn't been Dale Folwell yet. It wasn't Mark Walker. So we'll see. There's an appetite for an alternative, but I don't know if it's too late or if the Republican base is willing to shift their vote between now and March.
Well, I know that you'll be watching and that you'll be reporting as this race heats up. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
That's WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht. For his latest in-depth article on the GOP primary, go to the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.